Hello and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Aisha Salihu. On today's edition of the program, we'll take a look at issues around mental health, impact of mental health on humans' well-being. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. Although the terms are often used interchangeably, poor mental health and mental illness are not the same. A person can experience poor mental health and not be diagnosed with a mental illness. Likewise, a person diagnosed with a mental illness can experience periods of physical, mental, and social well-being. I have with me in the studio Felix Silvanus Yagazie, who majors in mental health and a full-time lecturer. He lectures mental health and psychology in the Federal Capital Territory School of Nursing, Gwagwalada, in the FCT. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, I know this topic is a bit dicey. As a matter of fact, I think it's vast and it's not something that can be exhausted in a moment. So now let us go straight to differentiating between mental health and mental illness. Is there any form of differences between both?
Yeah, there is. Mental health, according to WHO, which is World Health Organization, it simply means an individual, who realizes his abilities or her abilities, all right, and who is able to use his abilities for benefit for himself and others, and also who is able to use the same his ability or her abilities, to contribute to his community or her community. All right, so in the first place, these are keywords there. An individual should be able to realize his ability or her abilities, all right, or potentials. If some people call it potentials, all right, so people understand it as potentials. All right, so such an individual should be able to realize, his potentials or abilities, and should be able at the same time, to use his abilities or her abilities for her own benefit or his own benefit, including others, and also should be also to use the same abilities to contribute or potential to contribute to his community or her community. That is mental health. When we say somebody is actually in a good mental health shape or or state, well-being. All right. So anything that is contrary to this, the person has actually gone out of a normal mental health state. All right.
Okay, so if we're talking about factors that contribute to good mental health. Now, how then do we now differentiate when someone has a mental illness and it's not just the person's mental health being tampered with? So I'm asking what mental illness is now.
Is now, good. Mental illness or mental disorder, depends on, is simply when your behavior, all right, is affecting your daily activities, all right? Your behavior is also affecting your psychological, emotional state, all right? And it's also affecting others, not just you as well, all right? When you cannot regulate your emotion, all right? And you can also, your behavior is not in accordance with societal norms, all right, and values, and it's not just affecting you alone, but it's also affecting your family members and even community to a large extent. So that therefore it becomes abnormal, and it becomes a mental disorder. But the mental disorder there could be in a different form if you're able to diagnose.
Okay.
Right.
So now, what then do we say are the causes of mental health disorders or mental illness, mental disorders? What are the risk factors attached to these? What are the triggers?
Good. The correct word you use there now is the risk factors, because as a clinical psychologist, I wouldn't let anybody capitalize on the word causes of mental health disorder. Actually, there's nothing like causes, but we have risk factors. When I say risk factors, meaning that so many things can predispose it, can actually lead to someone developing a mental disorder. All right, there could be genetic factors, as we all know. There will be also environmental risk factors. All right, so these are among the risk factors that actually can make one develop a mental disorder. All right, so it depends. When it is being diagnosed, one will be able to know where actually such individual develop such
so
mental.
before one can reach the conclusion that someone is suffering from a mental disorder, there has to be diagnosis first.
Yeah, of
before
course.
we can reach that conclusion.
Of course.
Now, so if we're saying risk factors now, perhaps some persons are not even aware that they suffer from a mental disorder. Then what are the groups of mental disorders that we have? Just so when you start seeing that you're portraying these things, you know that, okay, perhaps I'm suffering from a mental disorder, although unchecked, until diagnosed.
You see, mental health disorders, like you said, we have different types. All right, we have bipolar disorder, we have personality disorder. All right, we have borderline disorder. It depends on you cannot diagnose yourself. That's true, but there are symptoms. There are symptoms that can actually prove that this person is actually have one of these or two mental disorders. All right, but then the symptoms could be when, like I told you in the definition of mental health disorder, I told you these are behaviors that are abnormal, from that shows or prove to be different from the societal norms and values.
Right.
So this, when you look at the symptoms, probably the person has begun to isolate himself or herself, from family members, and probably he or she oversleeps, and he or she is no longer active in his work. All right, in the workplace, he doesn't find interest in the daily activities. These are the symptoms. All right. These are the symptoms one can actually see. But then, like I said, these symptoms can only is after being diagnosed by a therapist that he or she can begin to undergo.
Now very quickly, I was reading up and then I learned that there are parts of mental health, or there are major components taken from cognitive health, emotional health, and behavioral health. And you did mention earlier about some genetic factors and environmental factors. Just briefly to highlight on cognitive health and emotional health and also behavioral health as the major components of mental health disorders.
Well, are you trying to refer to the risk factors?
Okay, I'm talking about the major
Please come again.
components, major components
Yeah.
as regards, say, parts of mental health now.
Okay.
So, it boils down to cognitive health, emotional health, and also behavioral health. Some persons have these features. They have these features, right? And then that's how we get to know how safe this person's mental health is via some cognitive behaviors or emotional behaviors, and even the behavioral health.
Okay. Well, coming from the cognitive, the if an individual has a cognitive pattern that is not in according to the values of the society or family values, automatically it means he or she is a symptoms of one having a mental health disorder.
Okay.
All right. So ideally, as a complete individual, one should be able to think rationally. One should be able to think in a positive manner that will not result in a injury form to himself or herself, and to also to the people around him or to people around her. So the cognitive part there means the person should be able to think positively that will actually affect his life or her life positively, including others around him. Okay. That should not think harmful things about himself or herself or others around him. Then the behavioral, meaning it should be your behavior should also be according to the norms of the family and society at large. The emotional part could be, you see somebody who he or she gets anger easily. All right. Probably when you look down, you see there's something eating him up.
Right.
Because it's not ideal for one to get angry easily.
Okay.
All right. It's not ideal for one to get angry easily. Sometimes even when such event did not call for one to become angry.
Okay.
You understand? So these are ways that you can, when you looked at it, you see you begin to like, this person is no longer the person I used to know. I think something is wrong with
I think
this
we'll
person.
pick up from that when we get back from this break. Do stay with us. This is Healthy Living on Trust TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining in, we're discussing issues around mental health, and I still have with me in the studio Sylvanus Yagazie, who's been highlighting issues around mental health. And now, before we went on that break, we did talk about symptoms, risk factors. You said you don't like to call it causes, more like risk factors that predisposes one to mental health disorders. Now, I like to move us quickly to coping mechanisms, because in an event where you've been diagnosed, you already know you have these symptoms, you know now that you have a mental disorder, perhaps bipolar or post-traumatic stress disorder or depression, addiction, or whatever mental health disorder you have. Now let's talk about coping mechanisms. What are the coping mechanisms available?
Okay, the coping mechanism, There are many coping mechanisms, this is necessary for one to get over whatever the type of mental disorder he or she is undergoing, all right? And this coping mechanism most of the times is handed over to the person undergoing one or two mental health disorder by a therapist, all right? The coping mechanism could be the person should be able to, to weigh his way of interaction. You should be able to, if he's the type that gets angry easily, you should be able to strike a balance, all right? You should be able to strike a balance and be able to relate with people around him.
Okay, so
right?
apart from striking a balance and being more active, being relating with people, what about seeking help? Because I'm aware we have to seek help often, say, speak to a therapist, a counselor. What do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. This is one of it too. You should, seeking of help from a therapist is also very important because one, you cannot actually know exactly how to handle your problem. All right, a therapist should be the one to help you through. All right, so seeking a help from a therapist is very important. In that way, one can also get better, and become very active and also do things according to how it should be done, that will not affect his mental health any longer.
Okay, so what about in an event after someone seeks help from a clinical psychologist or a therapist, a counselor, and then the person suffers relapse? Because I've seen stories making the rounds on news platforms about people who have actually been diagnosed of one mental health disorder or something, and they've come up with depression, and then they're receiving treatment, right? They're seeking help, they're getting the help. But say 2 years, 3 years down the line, you see these people start to have suicidal thoughts. They come, and some of them eventually take their own lives. So what about relapse? How do we address relapse?
A relapse is one of the problem or challenges, let me put it that way, that somebody who's undergoing a mental health problem most of the times encountered, all right? But he or she can overcome it, and this is how he or she can overcome it. Although from his side, there are things he's expected not to do, probably, let's take, for instance, if you are a guy, a man who is a smoker, all right? All right, or a drug addict, all right? So, and he's been advised by a therapist, maybe he smokes like a pack a day, and probably you can't stop that person from smoking immediately. So maybe the best way to get him through the therapy, sexual healing, is maybe you ask him to smoke 1 cigarette in a day, and gradually like that. But by the time he stops it and a relapse want to fall back, because he or she is used to smoking a pack in a day, probably the hanging around friends, his friends who smokes a pack of cigarette like he used to do then, can make him have a relapse, all right? So I think when you see somebody falling back to his previous bad behavior, which is relapse, it means he or she has started reconnecting
Okay.
with the people of with such behavior, bad
Okay.
behavior.
All right.
So it is advised you avoid coming in contact with
Okay.
people of such behaviors.
Okay.
So
I think if I get you correctly now, we're talking about if you're going to seek help from a therapist, it's not just about the efforts that the therapist put into you. It's more about self-development,
Exactly.
right? So you have to find your way around
exactly.
abandoning some of the behaviors, patterns that you were used to before falling into that particular mental disorder and then seeking assistance. So now, okay, very quickly now.
Sorry, please. The relapse again can occur if the therapist is not following up on the patient. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
Okay, I understand.
If the therapist who is handling the patient is not also doing a follow-up, when I say follow-up, maybe monitoring the patient, you get it, maybe monthly, or let's say weekly, or no matter the arrangement, you know, it depends on how the arrangement is. So a relapse can also a relapse can also occur from the therapist side.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Coming from the therapist side, maybe
yeah,
the
I understand
therapist
that. Maybe the therapist is not
negligent.
Right. Right. The therapist is neglecting his or her patients.
Yeah, exactly,
so,
exactly. So that will give a way or create room for the patient, you understand, to fall back to
relapse.
his or previous.
Okay, now,
exactly.
I want to ask this question because I know a lot of people out there do not really patronize the services of counselors and therapists. Some persons would rather just either talk to the family member or something.
Yeah.
Now, how easy, how affordable, how available is it for people who have these mental disorders to patronize, to seek help by patronizing counselors, therapists, or clinical psychologists?
You know, it's quite unfortunate that Africans, let me put it that way, don't actually believe in the services of therapists like clinical psychologists and, you know, counselors and the rest. They prefer going to meeting with pastors and all the spiritual men, you know, imam and the rest. But it's not on the issue of not being affordable. It is, but I think we should also look at it from the angle of ignorance.
Okay.
So, because you, like they said, you when you have knowledge of something, automatically your problem has been solved half. All right, your problem has been solved half of it. So, is the issue of ignorance. If it's not ignorance, then I don't think there's anything that will hinder them from not, because it is not that expensive that one who said he or she cannot afford it. You know, you are not expected to buy drugs that will cost you money. You know, so I think it's part of ignorance from the people, you know, those who are suffering from mental health.
Okay, just very quickly before we go, now give us your takeaway about mental health awareness, because I think people are still out there who are not aware of these.
Yes, my takeaway is that a lot of things is happening in our life today, in everybody's life, you know, that can actually trigger a mental health issue in our life. So I think we should be more aware, conscious of our mental health more than any other thing. You know, so people will tell you depression is real, and it is. Depression is real. So I think before you get to that level of being depressed or depression, you should be able to make your mental health as a priority. In fact, there is no health. Health is not complete without mental health. That's what the World Health Organization said. There is no health without mental health. So if I'm to advise anybody or to advise Nigerians, we should be able to regard our mental health as our number one priority, so that our health, our mental health will not crash. All right. So I think we should take it as a priority.
Okay.
We should take it as a priority.
All right then. So it is advised that you take your mental health as a priority.
Exactly.
Prioritize your mental health.
Exactly.
Amongst every other thing, mental
Exactly.
health is key.
Exactly.
And now on that note, we thank you for coming in today to help us highlight some of the issues around mental health. And you know, this is not all of the issues. We have a lot more to talk about,
Exactly.
but for the sake of our lack of time, we'd have to continue this conversation on another time. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Felix Yagazie, for
You're
coming to
welcome.
the studio.
Thank you.
And now, on a final note, the WHO stresses that mental health is more than just the absence of mental disorders or disabilities. Peak mental health is about not only avoiding active conditions, but also looking after ongoing wellness and happiness.
Exactly.
They also emphasize that preserving and restoring mental health is crucial on an individual basis, as well as throughout different communities and societies in the world. Now, it is priority that you take your mental health more seriously than ever. Thanks for staying with us on today's program. I'm Aisha Salihu, and you can continue this conversation with us across our social media platforms displayed on your screen. I hope to see you again at another time.
Thank you.
Have a great one.